She dropped out of high school at the start of 11th grade. COVID happened. It was a long haul and it was scary and I was unsure. And what I really leaned hard into was that relationship piece and making sure that she knew, or at least I said often, that I believed in her, I had faith in her, and that we weren't going to give up on her.
Hello, and welcome to the Mother's Quest podcast for a conversation with my longtime fellow podcasting friend and parenting guide, Casey O'Rourke. Casey is a positive discipline trainer, certified coach, and facilitator of personal growth and development who encourages parents to discover the purpose of our journey. Through workshops, live and online classes, individual coaching, a published book, and her Joyful Courage podcast, Casey helps us reconnect to our own empowerment and excitement in parenting, providing us with the tools and a shift of mindset that allows us to deepen relationships with ourselves and our families. In recent years, as Casey's own children have grown and flown, Casey has shifted her focus to supporting parents of tweens and teens. As I'm navigating fall school year transitions, sending Ryan off to his junior year of college, and guiding my youngest Jacob as he starts middle school, I knew I wanted to interview Casey so that I could anchor into her wisdom, humor, and heart-centered approach to parenting during this pivotal time. Before I share more about this conversation, I'm honored to introduce this episode's dedication with a mentor who introduced me to Casey years ago through her e-league community, podcasting legend and legendary mama, Elsie Escobar.
Hello, I'm Elsie Escobar, and I'm honored to dedicate this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast to Casey O'Rourke. I met Casey for the first time in 2015 when she was part of a mastermind that I was co-running at the time. From 2015 to now, Casey has worked with me often, and I've been honored to continue to help mentor her and just really help her with her podcast, Joyful Courage. The gift of getting to know Casey has been incredible. I've always been a big believer that those I work with have something to teach me. And every time a new person comes to work with me directly, I feel there's something I need to learn as well. And this has never been more true than with Casey. Casey has turned out to be my guide more than once, but more importantly, recently, because I now have teenagers, 2 teenagers that I am a mama of. One of them, as Casey would say, is my teacher and continues to teach me the things that I need to learn. At times, it's been scary, anxiety-inducing, dark, and hopeless. These are just some of the feelings that have come and gone lately, really. Being able to listen to Casey's wisdom on parenting as my coach and hear her voice on her podcast, I'm not sure what I would have done, particularly this past year. She was instrumental in holding my hand across a very precarious bridge. And I just want to say thank you. I love you, Casey. You're amazing.
Elsie, your dedication made me smile and nod my head knowingly. Parenting teens can be a harrowing roller coaster ride. But Casey's example reminds us that we do not have to go through this alone. We can find guides to light our way. And just as your student mentee, Casey, had something to teach you, Elsie, Casey helps us remember that our own children have so much to teach us. In this episode, we dive into the heart of Casey's epic life journey, from her experiences growing up as a child of divorce to her deep and supportive relationship with her daughter, Rowan. Casey shares openly about the ways that she had to evolve her own parenting and trust in the process. When Rowan's mental health challenges in high school led Rowan to chart an untraditional path. We also talk about the gifts of midlife, self-awareness, personal growth, and the new adventures that come when we embrace our roles as bird launchers versus empty nesters. This conversation left me deeply reflective about motherhood, the unpredictable twists and turns it brings, and the ways we can seek trust, connection, and even stillness in the midst of it all. I hope this conversation and a spark session that Casey and I will collaborate on this fall invite you to evolve your parenting, finding new ways to nurture connection with your children and within yourself. I'm Julie Neal, and this is Mother's Quest. Casey, welcome to the Mother's Quest podcast. You've been on my bucket list of guests for years now, and I always trust in right timing. I'm getting ready to transition Ryan, my oldest, to his rising junior year of college. And this thinking about how to be a thoughtful, empowered, and empowering parent, especially during these transitions, is front and center for me. And I look to you all the time for guidance on questions like this. Plus, I have a 12-year-old who just started middle school. And again, I'm like, thank God, Casey O'Rourke here. So I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm stoked to be here, Julie. You do really important work, and I'm really excited that I get to share my voice and my thoughts with your audience. So thank you.
We're going to start with the question I ask every guest. Tell me a little bit about your own mother and the impact that she had in shaping who you are.
I appreciate this question, and I appreciate my mom. So I'm a child of divorce, the classic 80s, Gen X, parents divorced, both remarried, had more kids. Saw my dad every other weekend and 2 weeks during the summer. It was really so weird now to think that that was how it used to be for kids and for families. But, as a young person, like elementary school age kiddo, I adored my mom, and she was kind of scary sometimes. And as I got into high school, we had some things happen in our family where I chose to move in with my dad full time, and that was not received well by my mom. And we went through, like a 10-year estrangement. We just couldn't figure out how to be in relationship with the new dynamic in the family. I had a brother who was 2 years younger, that still lived with my mom. And I had a sister, we share a mom, who was 7 when I moved out and in with my dad. But I was in high school, and that situation wasn't working for me. And I was now looking back, recognizing I was very brave in that decision. So my youngest sister then came up here. I live in Washington State, and my sister Jamie played softball for UW. And my mom would come and see her play a lot. And I feel like that's where she and I started to really rekindle our relationship. And then I had Rowan. I got pregnant with Rowan, and I knew I wanted my mom. Like, my mom has such a deeply nurturing spirit in a lot of ways. And I knew I would want my mom. But I also knew that my mom had 3 C-sections in the 70s, right? And so I said, I want you to be there, but we're doing it different. And I sent her a bunch of books. We did the Bradley method, or we did those classes. And I sent her the Baby Catcher, I think it's called, that memoir of a midwife. And I sent her all these books, and she was so cute. She made notes in the margins, and she was ready for this crazy off to her, really off the beaten path idea around what a birth could look like. And she was there for it. And then she stayed with Ben and I the first week that we had Rowan, and just watched us make choices. And I think in her mind, I went from Casey's kind of weird to, Casey's making educated decisions that look different than the decisions that I would make. And really having Rowan was a big shift in my relationship with my mom and how we related to each other. And then again, fast forward 14 years, things start to get really hard and weird, and not weird, but hard with Rowan. And there was one particular episode that I had with her that led me to call my mom and really acknowledge what she went through with me at that age. And we had one of the most healing conversations. Again, Rowan is the catalyst that we've ever had about that period of time. And so, what inspires me about my mom is her willingness to grow and her deep desire to be in relationship with her kids and her grandkids. I think that is at some point, I don't know if consciously or unconsciously she made this connection, but it was like, I get to evolve as a human and stay in relationship with my kids or not, and not be in relationship with my kids or not have the relationship I want. So, I just think I wouldn't take away any of what we've been through for the relationship that I have with her now. She is such a special person to me. And even just a couple weeks ago when I had just left him for the first night at his dorm and he was having some feelings and I texted my mom about it and she just knew exactly what to say. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful too to realize I know that's not the story that everybody has with their mom, especially when they've been through some hard times. I think our generation of Gen Xers, we kind of many of us, me and you at least, are so into personal growth, right? It's just the water that we drink, it's the air that we breathe. And that just wasn't on the radar of our mom's generation. And yet I feel like I have been blessed with a parent, a mom who is willing to dip her toe in there and more, really. So that's my story, my mom.
Oh, I'm so inspired hearing the story. And the minute you started talking about your experience as a high school person needing to bravely forge a different path, I thought about Rowan. And I will, of course, include in the show notes the link to the episode with you and Rowan, which you graciously allowed us to share on the Mother's Quest feed years ago, about that time in her life and yours where she needed to chart a different path and bravely say what she really needed and wanted. And you had to evolve your own expectations. And it's just so beautiful to see how that happened in your own life and just came full circle with your mom.
Yeah. And Rowan's killing it now too. She's because of, right? Not despite, but because of everything she's been through, she inspires me as well. I got bookends of women who are amazing.
It's really amazing. I have two sisters and I'm so close with my mom too, and also nieces. And, that relationship and bond is a really unique one. The next question I have for you before we dive into what I call the epic guideposts is what you feel like you have been most on a quest for in your life and maybe how that's evolving for you today, because I know it's changed a bit. And I'd love to also have you weave in the story about what happened with Rowan and maybe how the things you've been on a quest for evolved through that experience with her.
Yeah, well, you have a 12-year-old. So I'm a recent empty nester. I'm a recent bird launcher. My final bird was launched. And as we're recording, this is the second week of school down there at the University of Arizona, where I dropped my son off. He's second generation. I'm a wildcat as well. So that's crazy special, as you know.
So special. Yes.
But so when I think about, and what was the language you used? Purpose?
What have you been most on a quest for in your life?
Well, honestly, if I'm being totally honest, I feel like many women, kids in the house, it's really easy to not be tuned into having a quest beyond raising these kids and not losing my shit, on them and trying to be better. And so actually, no, even as I say that, so I've been a positive discipline facilitator since the kids were 1 and 4. And what hooked me about that program, that philosophy was how much, it was the start of my own personal growth and healing when I did the training to teach parents, to facilitate parents. And so I feel really fortunate because I never had the separation of leaving the house to go do work that was super separate from my family. My work has always been really integrated into my day-to-day family. Actually, maybe that is fortunate. Maybe that's not so fortunate. Who's to know? Who's to tell?
Pros and cons.
Right? Because I have not had a break from talking about, thinking about, writing about, speaking about the parenting work. But I also feel like the lovely thing about working with parents is being able to observe and being privy to the stories of others. I have been able to separate from my own experience and have a broader perspective. But I think the quest for me has really been this personal growth quest. And, in 2014, I became a life coach and I started coaching for a coaching program. And so I had, for a period of time there, really high repetitions of being in the coaching chair and getting coaching, which I feel really grateful for. And as the kids started to get older and I was able to spend a little bit more time away from the family, I really just fortified this commitment I have for supporting others in their growth. And now, so I'm 50, I'll be 51 in 2 weeks. 50 has been incredible. This year has been so much fun. It's been transformative. I've had the best year ever. So if anyone who's looking at 50 and worried about it, you're good.
It's a good decade. Usher in.
Yeah. And now it's I feel like I can't stop talking about, laughing about, embracing midlife. I mean, my experience is midlife is awesome. I'm more confident. I am more self-aware. I got myself a trainer and handled the way that I eat, so I feel better in my body. I am just loving this period of time. And the quest now has expanded to, how do I keep doing this work that I love, which is supporting parents and supporting people in being their best selves in the relationships that they're in, while also traveling and nurturing places that haven't gotten so much attention, such as, my relationship with my husband. But yeah, so I don't know, that was a long, rambly answer to your question, Julie. But I'm just, now the quest is, it continues to be expansion in new ways, because I don't have these two little people that I have to be available for and feed every day. Geez, just the feeding. Holy cow.
Well, I'm definitely just hearing the themes of your life around a commitment to personal growth and to expansion and evolution, being a mindful parent that's focused on positive discipline and bringing that to other families. And now this exciting new chapter for you that has created more space to focus on some other things. I think this would be a good segue to reconnect to the question I had about Rowan and talk about the first Epic Life guidepost. So Epic is this metaphor for me about mothers in particular stepping back into being the author of our story and center stage in our lives, because as you said, it is so easy to get lost in even just the feeding, but all the other things. So I started Mother's Quest as a midlife reclamation. Sometimes I call it my midlife renaissance in 2016 on my 45th birthday, and I'll be 53 in December. And it also is this acronym mnemonic for the guideposts that I think help us to live that life when we're raising our kids. So the first one, E, is about engagement, and it's engaging mindfully with our children. I'd love to have you start with explaining what positive discipline means, and then how you had to evolve that or bring that to what happened with Rowan. I think would be a great starting place.
Yeah. Well, positive discipline. First of all, I don't love the branding. I don't love the words positive discipline, and I'm not in charge of that. So positive discipline to me is really about teaching through relationship. It's about centering relationship, and it's about encouragement and setting limits while being flexible and being open. It's about learning who our children are and making decisions with them. I mean, there's a billion different ways that I could define positive discipline. I think it has its roots in Adlerian theory, which is Alfred Adler's work was all about our behavior really being motivated by our experience of belonging and significance. So when I think about parenting with positive discipline, that belonging piece, that love, that connection is centered. And that significance piece, meaning you have responsibility, you're dependent on, you have a purpose, right? So both of those things coming together to create, this ideal experience for our kids of feeling really stable, right? Even as life unfolds and they bump into all the places that gets hard and they make mistakes and, there's this underlying foundation of love and purpose and stability and this family unit that sometimes I'll refer to as, the soft landing. And, that's the utopia, right? But then what happens for all of us is we show up to, that's a great kind of compass. But we also have our baggage. We have our self-regulation skills or lack thereof, right? We have the beliefs that we formed over our time that start to percolate. We don't even realize we have them until, the challenges show up. And, as far as Rowan goes, and I'll just keep this brief, she really started struggling. And it was really a mental health conversation that I didn't realize was there at the start, and really struggled with high school and didn't have a place and was doing her own self-medicating, and things got really hard. And it was confusing to me because I went into the teen years with her thinking that it wasn't going to be that hard. Oh, sweet me of 2017. And when it was so confusing because I literally said to her, like, you won the ovarian lottery. I don't understand why you're so pissed at me all the time. Right? Like, it's centering myself really. And really learning from her, learning about surrender and trust as she made some really big declarations around what she needed. She dropped out of high school at the start of 11th grade. COVID happened. It was a long haul and it was scary and I was unsure. And what I really leaned hard into was that relationship piece and making sure that she knew, or at least I said often, that I believed in her, I had faith in her, and that we weren't going to give up on her. Now, her experience of receiving those messages in the moment was a lot of eye rolling and get out and, but over time and with consistency and really holding acceptance for like, okay, we're going to take a crazy side road right now. And I don't know where it's taking us. And I don't know what this looks like. I know what the traditional path looks like because that's the one I walked. And when I look around, that's what I see everybody else doing. So it was it was a lot of blind faith. And, she kind of prepped me for them. My husband got sick during COVID. And both of those situations were super intense and really highlighted for me that I have superpowers around not living in a future outcome that has not actually manifested. Like, I'm unwilling to live in a future world that hasn't manifested. I'm not going to be in fear. My head isn't in the sand. My head is not in the sand. However, I'm not going to create suffering for myself if it's not needed yet. Like, I'll hold off until I really need to feel, the fear or the grief or whatever, until it's actually what is unfolding, if that makes sense.
It does. Absolutely. And so are you open to sharing a little bit about the non-traditional path that Rowan took and how that has manifested in her life today?
I am. And I'm going to keep it kind of vague just because she has recently said, God, Mom, my entire adolescent mental health journey is all over the internet. And I keep saying, like, you told me I could. And I said,
Well, she willingly came to the microphone for that amazing conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And she has given me permission to talk. And, and I've told her too, like, listen, if you want me to do whatever I can to wipe that story off the internet, I will. Like, I don't need those shows. It's okay. And man, the impact she's had on being so open in her sharing has been profound for people. So her non-traditional path, was dropping out of school. And I mean, that's really the non-traditional path. She dropped out of school. And then it was...
And what grade was that?
That was in 11th grade. Although she did online school in 10th grade, which was a wash. And I was really aware that there was a big piece of brain development that wasn't happening in 10th grade because she was like, that social engagement just didn't exist. But she was herself and she was engaging with us and she had healthier habits. And so I was kind of like, how do I weigh this out? And then we moved and there was a big plan about, this is how I'm going to do it. When we move, it's going to be so great. And mental health actually moves with you, it turns out. So she dropped out and had some other issues that showed up at the time. And then about 6 months later, we were finally able to do a DBT program, a parent adolescent DBT program that was really a game changer for us. But even then, it was a 6-month program. It took her about 3 months to be a willing participant, if you know what I mean. So I like to remind that parents of that. And in that time, like she was really doing nothing. Like she wasn't working because, you know, her major mental health issue was just crippling anxiety. And so DBT was helpful. Ben getting sick was actually a huge gift as well because it shifted in that specific domain because it shifted our crisis. Plus COVID, like the entire planet was in crisis. And so there was a little shakeup there. She then went through about a year and a half after she dropped out. So she would have been a year and a half. So she would have been finishing up her senior year. But what she was doing is she actually went to a esthetician program. So she went to beauty school, became a licensed esthetician. And then, that was amazing accomplishment. She's growing and evolving. We had a couple different rocky things that happened within the 6 months after that. And then she got a job locally at a great spa here in town full of adults that saw, this young woman who had so many gifts and so much potential. And they've really nurtured her beautifully at that job. She's been there, I think, for over 2 years now. And she's gone back to college. She's gone back to school. She got her GED. And she's in school, almost done with her AA and wants to be a dermatologist.
Oh, wow. What an evolution. This word evolution keeps coming up. I know it's a thread.
For sure. And all of it, it's just really been for me, the initial question was, how did positive discipline support that? And there was a few different mantras that we talk about in positive discipline. And one of them that is the one for me is trust the process.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard to do.
Which it sounds so cliche, right? And it's so meh. Well, I did. It's funny because I was at a positive discipline conference full of educators and trainers and lead trainers. And I got to do a 10-minute TED-ish talk. And it was trust the process. That was the theme of the talk. And I kind of told our story. A lot of times I want to give the big old middle finger to trust the process. How about it's just regular over here? How about it's just a little bit easier? And then I don't have to be in this trust the process. But that's not life. Or if it is, it's only offered up that way for, brief periods of time or certain relationships. I mean, I definitely have a second kid who's been way more on the traditional path. Doesn't mean we haven't navigated lots of things that are on the challenges list for parents of teens. But man, relationship is solid and I believe in his life skills and my focus has been on developing his critical voice. And so I feel really confident in him learning from his mistakes, continuing to learn from his mistakes, and hopefully not making really, really big ones. So we'll see. You'll have to have me back on to talk about Ian.
Yes, definitely. Well, I feel like I want to acknowledge you and Rowan for being in relationship with one another through that hard time. And Rowan, especially for being vulnerable and open to sharing that experience, because Ryan, who's now 20 and a junior at UCLA, had a very challenging high school experience, kind of kicked off by COVID. I laughed when you said that you weren't expecting it to be so rocky because we had a pretty smooth sailing freshman year of high school. I had no idea what was coming. And, we ended up going through DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy together as well. And, during some of Ryan's darkest times in high school, one of the things we did was pull up that episode. And we didn't listen to the whole thing together, but we did listen to a specific part of it where you acknowledged that in negating Rowan's feelings, you were not seeing her and what she really needed. And that there's this way that we can dismiss or, we want to say no, you're fine. You got this. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, go do some yoga, take a walk.
And Ryan was able to say, that's how I feel you are with me sometimes. And it was an important conversation and shift. And man, it was a roller coaster ride. And freshman year of college was a particularly challenging time. And I don't think either of us could have imagined where he is today, more fully embracing his autistic identity, being a neurodiversity advocate, creating the Bruin Neurodiversity Collective on campus because he used his voice to talk about the supports that were missing. And all of those things came from a lot of hardship. But the strength of where he is today and where we are in our relationship with one another would not have happened without that process. So when you said trust the process, I'm like, yeah, I do, because I've seen where it can take us. And it is so hard when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah. And we don't know the gifts. I remember actually saying, oh God, I remember actually saying that to Rowan. I remember I was standing right in the door frame. I was holding the door frame and I was like, there may be a time in your life where you look back and you realize, wow, I learned so much through this hard time. And she looked at me with just daggers in her eyes. Like, how dare you? And it's so funny too. And that interview, my good friends, like people that are my college or high school friends, when they listened to it, the part that landed the most for them is when I said something about how I would have driven Rowan crazy if we were the same age in high school. And Rowan goes on to describe how she imagines me in the high school hallway as just like this super cheerful, bright sunshine or whatever she said. I had multiple friends growing up of mine that listened and that reached out to me and said, oh my God, Rowan totally nailed you as a teenager. And it's funny. It's interesting too, because we are so different. We are so different. Ian and I have very similar temperaments. And as Rowan gets older, we're laughing more and more about how similar she is to her dad temperamentally. And I'm so grateful to have the self-awareness of that. Like, we see the world out of completely different lenses. And we hold so much lightness around that versus like, no, you need to see it the way I see it because my way is right. And even as I say these things out loud, Julie, I'm like, geez, this is exactly what my marriage counselor is trying to get me to do with this. So isn't that funny, right? Like, the things that we learn in one relationship aren't always automatically transferred over into another, but that's a different podcast.
Well, we went deep and wide on the first guidepost and we'll need to move through the others more quickly. But I'm so glad we spent the time there because there's so much richness in everything that you've shared. The next guidepost, P, stands for passionate and purposeful. And this is about the impact that you make in the world beyond your family. You've already started to talk about that impact. I have witnessed you evolve your focus as your life has changed from maybe supporting parents with younger kids to supporting parents now with kids who are middle school, teenage, and becoming, young adults in the world. I would love to hear a little bit about your focus and how to support parents whose kids are either getting ready to fly or now on their own in their new chapter.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. I think I said this to you in a voice memo or somewhere, but I've always kind of followed where I am in life. My work has followed where I am in life. And my husband even teased me about this not too long ago. Like, so are you going to now be like a midlife coach? Are you going to talk to parents with kids who are like in their 20s? And my first impulse is to say, well, of course. But ultimately, I do think that this adolescent space is so underserved. I mean, over the last 5 years, I feel like more and more people are coaches and educators are getting ever braver and more willing to step into this space. But it's a precarious space and we want to get it right and we want to be helpful. And what I have found in my own experience with my two kids, as well as the experience of supporting so many parents, is that the most important thing we can do is not make it worse. It's a hard time and we can't circumnavigate teen brain development. Like, it's happening. Hard times are happening. Our kids are going to, and not all kids, some kids sail on through the adolescent years and that's great, but a lot of them don't. I mean, they sail through it, but the waters are really choppy. And so I really find myself, working more and more with people who have older teens that are post high school or, college or launched, but I'm not going anywhere as far as the parents of tweens and teens go. Like, I just really feel confident in what I bring in positive discipline, but also who I am as a facilitator and a coach, reminding them and really guiding people towards building that relationship that can sustain the choppy waters, right? And I think as well, like, I just got a email from someone just this morning, sharing about where her 17-year-old's at. And part of our work, and I mentioned this to you earlier, part of our work is also helping ourselves be with whatever it looks like. I know for me with Rowan, I had that opportunity. Like, how am I going to be with this? How can I take care of me through this? And that includes kids that are experimenting or misusing substances, the mental health journeys that our kids go through, dropping out of high school or alternative education, or just a lack of seeming motivation and self-drive and education, like all of it, fill in that blank. How are we supporting ourselves and being with it? And also like being with it in a way that when we look back, we think, oh, you know what? I handled that well. Not because look at them now. Obviously, they're superstars, so I must have handled it well. But because we can look back and not feel guilt or shame or shitty about how we managed through their hard times. So that's kind of where I feel like my work has evolved too.
Yeah. And we need you. I agree with you. It's such a critical time.
I need me too. Sometimes I listen to myself. I'm like, geez, Casey, you should listen.
Yeah. And listening to our own voice is so helpful. Yeah. I think I'm just like, I took a few notes, and, one thing that is coming through is this like, first, do no harm. But then immediately I went to like, oh my God, but we're going to make a million mistakes and we will sometimes do harm. And I was listening to the recording of a workshop you just gave about self-drive last night. One of the things I appreciated that you named was like letting our kids know when we make mistakes. Like, you know what, I really messed this up and I'm going to try to do this differently. And I appreciate that. And I was able to see like, oh, I think I do that. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I don't accept responsibility and it's a growth edge. But there are times where I acknowledge when I'm making mistakes or places that I know I need to shift. And I think that's so powerful to model that for our kids. You are moving us beautifully into the next guidepost I, which stands for invested in ourselves. And you said, that one of the things you try to support yourself and other parents to do is to just be with what is happening. What's one or two tools that you draw from to take care of yourself during the really challenging times of adolescence?
Well, I think it's so powerful and useful and important and works for me to have a place of self-reflection and to carve out that space of getting what's in the body out of the body. So as far as like practical tools go, I'm a huge journaler. I love to journal. I mean, I've got books and books and books, and I just write about what's going on. I write about how I feel. I don't worry about it being coherent or spelled right. I just pour out onto the page, and I do that. I do that regularly. I don't do it every day, but I try to do it every day. I do it in the morning. For me, the quiet morning time is so special and sacred. And the other thing that I think is really useful is a practice of stillness. And, call it meditation, call it grounding, but giving yourself the opportunity to intentionally be still, to have a nervous system that is slowed down, to have the intention of an open mind. Although lots of times I'm sitting in stillness and I'm playing a tape, which is fine too. Sometimes it's like, okay, I'm just going to be with this storyline and just like intentionally be with it instead of kind of holding on and letting it drag me through its process. And then other times, so I love Insight Timer. Do you use Insight Timer?
I have it, but I don't use it often. But I was just talking to my therapist about this very issue yesterday.
Yes. Well, there's tons of guided meditations and talks and amazingness, but there's also these timers. You can create a timer for yourself, and I have a variety of them for any length of time, but then you can also add in little chimes or bells throughout. So if you do like, okay, I'm going to sit in stillness for 10 minutes, but I'm going to have a bell go off every 2 minutes. And that's going to remind me if I'm spinning in my planning or latest drama or whatever, the bell gives me the opportunity to release that and just come back to my breath and try to find. And I think like, wouldn't that be so useful in life? And so that's kind of what I use that stillness for, is a practice for life, is a practice for like, oh, wait a second. I am spinning into worst case scenario, or I am spinning into a storyline that may or may not even be true. Like, let me just come back to myself. Let me come back to being true, like being in my truth. But even more than that, just like calming everything down. So those are two practical tools that you can use. But actually, even as I say that, before those tools, it's really that word investment. Are you willing to carve out that time? It's like going to the gym. We can all want to go to the gym, but are we going to the gym? So making the time to really be with that inner reflection and that internal experience that we're having, I think is so important for all of our relationships and life.
As I said, so timely. I literally am on a quest for how can I bring more stillness into my days, especially because I received my own ADHD diagnosis around my 50th birthday. And in my midlife, post-menopause, the sort of scattered nature of my brain has been exacerbated. And I know that if I could just get myself to slow down a little bit every day, there's so many things, including...
You're 53 and post-menopause? I'm still waiting for it to show up.
I know mine started early. Like I've been like 7+ years post-menopause.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, get ready. Yeah,
I'm ready. I'm like, come on. Get on with it.
A journey too. And thankfully, I feel like more people are talking about that time and how to care for our bodies. We could do a whole other episode about that.
Yeah, I'll come back and we'll talk about that.
Well, we're at the last guidepost C, which stands for connected. And it is about remembering that we don't have to be on this journey alone. It's about how we invest in the relationships that matter to us. What's some wisdom that you have learned along the way about how to connect?
This is such an interesting question for me, Julie, because if there is one place in my life where I have always felt a huge level of abundance, it is in my friendships. Like, I don't even know how to tell you how to connect because it's always been a part of my life. I have circles of girlfriends that overlap with each other because they've met each other over the years, from my first childhood friend, Amy Prokowski, shout out to Amy, to my high school circle, to my college circle, my 20s circle. And it's, for me, and I'm very extroverted. I don't know if that's obvious or not, but it's a part of who I am and my personality. So I want to just acknowledge that privilege, whether or not it's a privilege, but it just has never felt, that's not that it's never. We did have a little stint for 6 months where we lived in Big Bear, California when Rowan was like 2. And that was the only time in my life where I could not find friends. And it was so bizarre to me. I was like, how do I not have any friends?
This is not how it usually works for me in my life.
So I feel like that was a place problem and not a me problem. But yeah, I am someone who is I think that I'm pretty wide open. I think there's a piece around cultivating approachability. And I can't do it alone. I don't want to. And I am a pretty open book, much to, I think, my family's at times dismay. But if somebody says, how are you? I'm not very good at pretending, right? I'm not, or even leaving things out. I could probably leave a few things out. I'm getting better at that. But, authenticity is something that comes naturally to me. And I'm grateful for that. And I also think that that is a place that makes the space that I share with others feel safer too, because what you see is what you get. And it's not so much like I say what I think, because I actually I have one friend in particular who she's so amazing and badass. And she's like, I don't care what people think. And on one hand, I'm like, I want that because I care a lot. But on the other hand, I also I think I bring a softness that is, I don't know, useful to some people, but maybe a turnoff to others. So all this to say, connection, I think is really important. And you don't have to have 500 friends. that's one of the places where Rowan and I get to appreciate each other and the differences that we have. Like for her, it's one or two friends that really matter and is enough. And for me, like I'm packing up to go for a weekend away. And I'm like, how am I going to, for a friend's 50th? And I'm thinking, how am I going to integrate all these circles that are showing up to this party and spend time with all of them, and fill up with all of them. So, intentional connection. I love the circles that I've created and found myself inside of online and doing the work that I do. You do the same kind of work with your circles. And it's amazing. I'm sure you feel the same way. It's amazing how deep and vulnerable we can get on Zoom. Like it's so, clients and people in my membership program who are like, this is so weird how close I feel to all of you. And I've never been in the same room.
I know, it is amazing. And then it is amazing on the rare occasion when you actually get to see one another live. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's wonderful to see your abundant relationships and connections. And I have absolutely experienced your authenticity and your warmth, both online and in person. Shout out to being roommates at She Podcast Conference. That was a treat. Well, we're getting close to the end of our conversation, and this is a time. First, I'll give you an invitation to offer a resource or a challenge to me and anyone listening who wants to say yes. And then we'll move into acknowledgements and takeaways, what we both are leaving this conversation with. So first, what might you want to challenge or offer?
So the first thing is I would encourage everybody to figure out a time and a space for leveling up in that internal self-reflection and just internal paying attention with a journal or, there was a period of time where I would just capture voice memos every day. Whatever works for you to get what's happening internally for you out of your body through writing or voice, I would encourage you to do that. And making time for stillness, getting the Insight Timer app bonus. And the other offer that I have is I have a 6-week parenting class happening. It starts September 24th. And it's positive discipline for parents of tweens and teens. And it's just the core 6-week workshop that I offer once a year. And it's live on Zoom and makes a big impact on the people that go through it. It's a great place for foundation and community, as well as accountability and practice and integration. So
amazing. We'll include links in the show notes, but if you can also say out loud your website or what's the easiest way for people to find you.
So if you go to besproutable.com/teens, you'll get to my space in our company. So Joyful Courage is the name of my podcast and was the name of my business for a long time. And then I merged with my good friends. And now Joyful Courage is the adolescent brand of Sproutable. So you find me there. And once you get to besproutable.com/teens, you'll see the navigation bar for classes and coaching and the podcast. I'm also on Instagram at joyful_courage. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook group for parents of teens and tweens, which is called Joyful Courage for Parents of Teens. It's really original. So any of those places, you can find me.
Wonderful. And you and I are conspiring. We don't have all the details yet, but we are both leading circles this fall for moms of kids who are in their next chapter, have grown and flown. And we decided that we're going to do what I call a spark session together, where you will be our resident expert, bringing these relational positive discipline insights and frameworks to this particular time in our mothering journey, where we're supporting our young people as they are no longer living home with us. And I'm really looking forward to that. So it'll be a 90-minute kind of workshop style sometime in the fall. And we'll make sure that we include that information and the date and how you can register and be part of that.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
I'm excited. All right. So this is our closing. I love to end with acknowledgements because I feel like I always leave these conversations enriched and with insight and things that I deeply appreciate. And there was so much that I really got from you. So I'll go first and then I'll let you close us out with anything that you feel like you're appreciating or that might be in sharper focus for you. I mentioned before this word evolution is feeling very present for me. Seeing our children evolve, evolving in our relationship with our kids and our moms, and also within ourselves. I'm really leaving with a reminder about the importance of trusting the process, even when it feels very hard, when we're in the midst of it. I'm thinking about how important it is to be rooted in relationship with our children, with ourselves, with our community, and how midlife can actually be a beautiful opportunity to redefine ourselves. And then finally, I would say the power of stillness and reflective practice for coming back to ourselves and just the beauty of honoring our own path and the path of our children. So there's just so much goodness I'm leaving with. What about you?
Love it. Yeah, I'm appreciating the word evolution as well. But honestly, Julie, I just really appreciate you. You are a skilled host. And this was really fun. Like, I feel like you took me on a journey, starting with getting to talk about my mom and the way that you framed that question. That was a big gift. So thank you for that. And yeah, just really appreciating you and the work that you do in the world, appreciating everybody that's listening. Thank you. You've made it this far. Good job. Thank you for hanging with us. And yeah, I mean, I am so appreciating what feels like a wide open space of right now and the feeling gratitude around being in the mindset of anything is possible. I feel like that's a privilege to be able to sit in that mindset. And I do sit in it. So I'm grateful for that and appreciating my family and their tolerance for my sharing.
Special shout out to Rowan.
Special shout out to Rowan for sure. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. I know there's more to come, and I'm so looking forward to sharing this conversation.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about how to join the Mother's Quest community, visit mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and help us to spread the word. I want to end with some words to help light the way on your quest. Seize the day, love your people, honor your gifts. Until next time.